From a mayor for a man AWOL with his 3 children for a year. A report finds bullying and harassment are still rife at fire and emergency. All aboard the bus with your tiny pooch in Auckland, but there's a catch. We'll have all you need to know. New Zealand Rugby to go fishing for a new coach before the World Cup. Wordle, the Queen, and how to do a rat test. All the big stuff we went searching for on the interwebs this year. Don't forget, you can catch us live, Sky Channel 83. RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi Marie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. The Blood Service says it's dealing with a rising number of people wanting blood from donors who haven't been vaccinated against COVID. The issue has been at the centre of a court case where the parents didn't want blood from people who have had the COVID vaccine used in their baby's care. Health correspondent Rowan Quinn reports.
In evidence used in the case, the Blood Service says the requests have risen in the past 6 to 9 months, including from parents of children at Starship Hospital. It says it's a global trend, placing a significant burden on hospital teams. The service, like those in Australia, Britain, Canada and more, does not allow people to choose their own donors except for very rare circumstances. It says that's because it can actually create more risk and because the blood from vaccinated people is safe.
The Police Minister is promising a circuit breaker in the battle against youth crime, announcing more speedy support for children who break the law. Under the new approach, the police will contact Oranga Tamariki within 24 hours of arresting a child under 14 if they've committed a serious offence. Within 48 hours, a cross-agency plan will be put in place. Chris Hipkins says it will make a difference.
This will allow us to make sure that we're supporting those family, those whānau, where their young people are getting into trouble. In some cases, the police will tell us that those family members are tearing their hair out as well. They're looking for more support.
Chris Hipkins says in some cases the child may be put in care. Fire and Emergency has committed to overhauling its complaints process following a damning review of its workplace culture, which found bullying and harassment are still rife. The board chair, Rebecca Cogan, who commissioned the report, says lack of progress since the 2019 report is disappointing.
I acknowledge that it's a deeply traumatic and horrific experience that they have been through, and that's why we asked for the review, right? We cannot continue in that manner any longer. We must draw a line in the sand, and I can give you my 100% reassurance that zero tolerance going forward. This is the line in the sand.
Rebecca Cogan has offered her apology to complainants who felt more traumatised by Fire and Emergency's complaints process. The Race Relations Commissioner has commended the Kaipara Mayor for backtracking on a karakia ban at Council Hui. Craig Jepson repeatedly interrupted Councillor Pera Panioda when she attempted to open a meeting with karakia last week. But now the Mayor and councillors have agreed they can recite karakia on a rotating basis immediately prior to Hui. Commissioner Meng Foon is pleased he had urged the Mayor to reconsider.
I think there needs to be a healing process that goes through to ensure that the karakia and other aspects of community culture is safe.
A petition calling for the Mayor to stand down has collected more than 5,500 signatures. The National Party says a workforce crisis is starting to emerge in the Defence Force as personnel leave for better salaries. A briefing to the Defence Minister shows a ship had to cut a fisheries patrol operation in the Pacific short over staffing shortages. National's Defence spokesperson Jerry Brownlee says it's concerning attrition levels are starting to impact operations. The Minister, Pene Henare, is confident now that the borders are open, morale will lift and the workforce will stabilise. And Commerce and Consumer Affairs Minister David Clark is set to announce he won't be contesting the 2023 election. Along with other senior Labour ministers, the former Health Minister was asked this afternoon whether he'd be staying. But unlike others who gave a straight answer, Dr Clark said he had no comment and any announcement would be made in due course. He spent much of the year working on reforms to the supermarket duopoly and the market study into building supply materials. The Prime Minister will reveal her reshuffled cabinet in the new year. To sport, and New Zealand Rugby say they've learnt from the process used to appoint All Blacks coach Ian Foster, and they'll do it differently next time. A decision on Foster's successor is likely to be announced before next year's World Cup. New Zealand Rugby Chief Executive Mark Robinson says with the changes to other international head coaches this week, they could break traditional timeframes when selecting the All Blacks' next boss.
The discussions we're having with all of our talent across the board would signal that we acknowledge that as well. You know, we're keeping a very close eye on what's happening internationally, obviously, but at the same time for us that means we have to be aware of what that means for our talent too.
Robinson confirmed an announcement on the Black Ferns coach won't be before Christmas. New Zealand Rugby will crown their top performers at their annual awards tonight. The Breakers are looking to bounce back to winning ways in a top-of-the-table NBL clash against the Sydney Kings in Auckland tonight. The second-place Breakers are coming off their fourth loss of the season. The game tips off at 7:30. And Qatar received just over 765,000 visitors during the first 2 weeks of the Football World Cup, falling short of the country's expectations for an influx of 1.2 million visitors during the month-long event. A huge surge in spectators at this stage is unlikely, with only 8 teams still in Doha and 8 games remaining in the tournament. The influx of visitors represents a 25% boost to the country's resident population of 3 million. That's the news.
They put their lives on the line every day to save people.
Tonight on Nights, sleep 7 or 8 hours a night is what's recommended, but shift work, overcrowded housing and stress can all result in a sleep deficit. How can we improve the sleep of those most in need of it? Alison Balance takes us to the Cook Islands, and our forest correspondent goes to the coast to discuss the health of our kelp forests. Join us on Nights with Karen Hay after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your app, on your RNZ app on your mobile phone. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint right now. The short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. For Northland, Auckland, Coromandel, cloudy periods today with rain or showers in eastern areas and strong easterly winds. Showers everywhere tomorrow, easing in the evening. Bay of Plenty, patchy rain, mainly about the eastern ranges, becoming heavier and widespread tomorrow, easing tomorrow evening. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers today, rain tomorrow, heavy in northern Gisborne, clearing in the afternoon or evening. From Waikato to Wellington, including Wairarapa and the Central High Country, also for Nelson, Marlborough and Bulla. Mainly fine today, but patchy rain tonight in Waikato. Occasional rain tomorrow, sometimes heavy, with possible thunderstorms from Waikato to Manawatu, easing in the evening. Canterbury, fine spells, brief rain around midday tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain, sometimes heavy with possible thunderstorms tomorrow evening. For Otago and Southland, cloudy periods and scattered showers. And for Dekohu, Chatham Islands, fine breaks. The time is 7 minutes past 5. You can hear the creaking. That's Lisa raring to go. I'll have news headlines and traffic for you at 20 past 5.
Ngā mihi, Evie. I think we need a bit of CRC in here. Maybe someone can get onto that. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai, ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Tonight, people who've complained about the conduct of lawyer Sue Gray and the spread of COVID disinformation say months on they're still waiting for their concerns to be addressed, while Sue Gray continues to use her platform as a lawyer. Ms Gray has been an outspoken anti-COVID-19 vaccination campaigner with social media that posts or hosts anti-vaccine content. She has also made false claims about COVID-related deaths. This week she was in court representing parents who were refusing to let their son have the blood of people vaccinated against COVID-19. Despite him urgently needing life-saving heart surgery. Yesterday, the court appointed medical guardians to decide on his hospital care. In May last year, Jacinta complained to the Law Society about disinformation being spread or hosted on Sue Gray's social media site, including calls for hangings and referring to the Prime Minister as the poisoner who needed to be aborted. And she wasn't the only one who complained. Checkpoint is aware of other complaints to the Society too. But Jacinta says she's still waiting for a resolution.
It's the disinformation around vaccines and how she thinks people should handle them to inflate beliefs about the vaccines being dangerous.
Is she ever not a lawyer? Is she expressing these views in her personal capacity or as a lawyer, in your view?
I have never seen any sign of her saying that what she was talking about was not connected to her position as a lawyer. I've definitely seen people identify her as a lawyer and talk to her as if they respected her position as a lawyer. So I don't feel at all that she's ever said, I'm not speaking as a lawyer.
And how do you feel about that?
Well, I feel that is a very illegitimate way to use her position as a lawyer, because it tells people that she knows what she's talking about, that her opinion is valuable, whereas she doesn't know what she's talking about. She doesn't have anything to offer in terms of her professional expertise around whether vaccines are safe or not.
Where is this information turning up?
What I complained about was what she said on her Facebook page. But you can see she's in the media talking about various things in every opportunity that she can take, and she has taken the opportunity to speak to a health select committee about a very weird conspiracy theory, for example. So it's basically any opportunity she gets to spread misinformation is taken advantage of.
So your complaint has been with the Law Society, for about 18 months now.
Yep.
What do you think about the time it's taking to get a result?
I'm very worried about the damage that is done by her to people that think that because she's a lawyer and because she is apparently acting in the capacity of somebody who has attained this professional position, that I'm worried about the damage that she does to people by spreading deeply concerning conspiracy theories.
What would you like to happen?
I would like somebody to tell her that she's not allowed to post on social media at the very least, and that she needs to disassociate her personal opinion and her speculations from any capacity she has as a professional lawyer.
As far as you know, Jacinta, where is your complaint now? Where has it ended up?
Oh, it's gone to another group, which is the Lawyers and Conveyancers Disciplinary Committee, is what it's called, I think.
So still no result, 18 months on, still waiting.
Yeah, that's right. Basically, it's gone to this committee that I don't know anything about, and I don't know what they're doing. They haven't communicated to me at all.
How did you come to be a person who was complaining?
I was concerned about the misinformation that was going around because I care about some vulnerable people, and I felt that the misinformation was putting them at risk by encouraging people not to consider masking, not to consider social distancing, not to consider vaccination. So I was looking at what Sue and people like her were putting out to persuade people not to do these very basic protective actions. When I saw not just what they were saying, but how they were saying it, how they were persuading people, I became very worried, and I wanted professional bodies to oversee their members to make sure that their members were not using their positions to promote these conspiracy theories.
Now, Checkpoint has contacted the Law Society wanting to know the volume and status of the complaints against Sue Gray, but it is said legally it's prohibited from sharing that information with us. It is almost 14 minutes after 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. 3 years after a damning report into workplace culture at fire stations and other parts of fire and emergency, a new review has found bullying and harassment are still rife. The Board of Fire and Emergency says today marks the line in the sand, but complainants say a lot of work is needed to restore trust. Ruth Hill reports.
They put their lives on the line every day to save people and property. Yet there's been some less than heroic behaviour by some firefighters behind closed doors. Deputy Public Service Commissioner Helene Quilter says Fire and Emergency did make a start on the sweeping recommendations in Judge Coral Shaw's 2018 report, but it's fallen short.
Poor behaviours remain that are both causing harm to people and tarnishing Fire and Emergency's reputation.
The reviewer, Belinda Clark, says people don't trust Fire and Emergency to handle their complaints appropriately. She's recommended the establishment of an independent authority.
I found that the process is not fit for purpose. It is, in fact, deepening the trauma that's experienced by victims of bullying and harassment.
The review has found a third of complaints are over a year old, and the process and communication are unclear and stressful. Ms Clark says change needs to come from the leadership at every level.
Fire and Emergency needs to adopt a zero-tolerance policy to bullying and harassment. There needs to be strong and accountable leadership throughout the organisation, and this means that leaders should be chosen and promoted based on their people management skills as well as their technical skills.
Other recommendations include dismissing those found by an investigation to have committed bullying or harassment and referring all allegations of criminal offending to the police. Volunteer firefighter Tony Sartorius runs VolleyNet, an online support group for volunteer firefighters.
I've supported people who have been sexually assaulted, who've been physically assaulted, who have been bullied and harassed. A lot of the time it's pretty horrendous.
He says most of the country's 700 volunteer fire brigades are in little communities, so complainants can end up completely isolated, particularly if they're women.
It's been common, in fact I'd probably say it's been normal, that people who have made these complaints have ended up basically run out of the brigades. And in many cases, or at least a few cases that I've personally had contact with, people have actually been effectively forced out of their community as a whole.
Tony Sartorius, a volunteer firefighter for 30 years, hopes this new report will be the kickstart the organisation needs. Fire and Emergency Chair Rebecca Cogan says it accepts all recommendations. She's offered her complete apology to complainants.
I acknowledge that it's a deeply traumatic and horrific experience that they have been through, and that's why we asked for the review, right? We cannot continue in that manner any longer. We must draw a line in the sand, and I can give you my 100% reassurance that zero tolerance going forward. This is the line in the sand.
Internal Affairs Minister Jan Tinetti has announced she's appointing the report's author Belinda Clark to the board, along with former MP Ruth Dyson. She's asked her officials to report back in February on the next steps for setting up an independent complaints authority for fire and emergency.
Ruth Hill reporting. The government is promising a circuit breaker in its bid to halt youth crime, fast-tracking support for young children who break the law. It's the latest in a series of announcements rolled out by Labor under pressure to deal with a spate of ram raids and retail crime. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Hadley Poesi is a youth worker in West Auckland, a regional manager with the organisation Zeal.
It's not uncommon for us to come across a 7-year-old who isn't enrolled into school. It isn't uncommon for us to have 8, 9, 10-year-olds who are fending for themselves and looking through trash cans to get food.
These are the kids, he says, who end up in trouble and causing trouble.
Now we're seeing what happens when we turn a blind eye to what's actually happening on the ground.
Eyes wide open now, the government in response mode after a spate of ram raids and other retail crime. Last week it announced money for dairies to buy fog cannons. Today, what the police minister's calling a circuit breaker. Speedy support for children under 14 who break the law.
This will allow us to make sure that we're supporting those family, those whānau, where their young people are getting into trouble. In some cases, the police will tell us that those family members are tearing their hair out as well. They're looking for more support.
Under the new approach, the police will contact oranga tamariki within 24 hours of arresting a child who commits a serious crime. Within 48 hours, a cross-agency plan will be put in place.
For example, if the home environment there is not necessarily one that's going to keep them out of trouble, then oranga tamariki do have the options to potentially give them an alternative. It will vary child to child, but the key thing is it will be faster.
The announcement also includes another $2 million for wraparound support in Auckland, Waikato, Northland and the Bay of Plenty. Hadley Poesi is underwhelmed and unconvinced.
It's another headline. It's not going to do much at all. $2 million is a drop in the ocean of what's needed.
There have been multiple drops in the bucket over the last few months and over the last 5 years, in fact.
Youth crime has been falling over the last decade but has begun trending back up. In the last year, crimes by children under 13 jumped 24% in Tamaki Makaurau.
Clearly the government have developed a culture of excuses when it comes to crime, and we're reaping the results of that now.
The National Party has promised tougher penalties for young serious offenders, such as putting them in ankle bracelets or under intense supervision. Paul Goldsmith says that's what's really required.
Just having a quicker family group conference, a pat on the head and we'll see you again next weekend doesn't resolve the issue.
This much more intensive approach is actually delivering benefits already.
Chris Hipkins says ram raids are down nearly 80% over the past 3 months, proving its approach is working. Another youth worker, Aaron Hendry, is pleased with the announcement, but worries whether oranga tamariki is too stretched.
A lot of our services are really dealing with crisis a lot, and that prevents us from being able to do that really good early intervention work that would prevent a young person from getting in front of the courts in the first place.
The government says it's confident oranga tamariki is resourced to meet the new time frame.
It's 5:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can text us 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time for the headlines. Ko ewe anō tēnei.
The Police Minister says a new approach against youth crime, faster support for children who break the law, will make a difference. The police will contact oranga tamariki within 24 hours of arresting a child under 14 if they've committed a serious offence. Within 48 hours, a cross-agency plan will be put in place. The Blood Service says it's dealing with a rising number of people wanting blood from donors who haven't been vaccinated against COVID. The service says it's a global trend, placing a significant burden on hospital teams. The issue has been at the centre of a court case where the parents didn't want blood from people who have had the vaccine used in their baby's care. The board chair of Fire and Emergency has offered her apology to complainants who were re-traumatised by Fire and Emergency's complaints process. It follows a review of its workplace culture, which found bullying and harassment are still rife 3 years after a damning report. National's Defence spokesperson says it's concerning staff levels are impacting defence operations. A briefing to the Defence Minister shows a ship had to cut short a fisheries patrol operation in the Pacific over staffing shortages. And Auckland City Mission is anticipating another challenging season, calling for help once more. Last year, the charity provided the equivalent of more than 3 million meals. And with the rising cost of living and fewer donors, demand has not gone down in 2022. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Auckland, a breakdown is blocking the middle lane heading south on State Highway 1, just before Simon Street on-ramp. Still in Tamaki Makaurau, a serious crash has closed State Highway 22 between Blackbridge Road and Great South Road, south of Karaka. It's likely to remain closed for some time while the serious crash unit investigates. And north of Wellington at Otaki, lots of travellers southbound on State Highway 1 tonight are causing congestion. That's now back to Mokena Kohere Street. You'll need extra time for your journey there. I'll have more news headlines and traffic for you at 5:40.
Ngā mihi, Evie. New Zealand rugby could well be set to break with tradition and appoint a new All Blacks coach before a World Cup begins. With the future of Crusaders coach Scott Robertson resurfacing this week, NZR boss Mark Robinson today confirmed they have begun the process concerning who will coach the All Blacks beyond next year's tournament in France. Here with more is sports reporter Clay Wilson. Ooh, interesting developments, aren't there? A lot of talk this week. So what exactly was Mark Robinson saying?
We talked about this earlier earlier in the week, didn't we? And it came off the back of Warren Gatland's comments that New Zealand Rugby should sign up Scott Robertson and do it as soon as possible. Now, Mark Robinson wasn't revealing a lot, but he did say that they had started at New Zealand Rugby talking about who was going to coach the All Blacks after next year's World Cup, and they had a board meeting yesterday and it was discussed. At that board meeting, he said they're keeping a close eye on what's happening in the international coaching landscape. Of course, a lot going on there at the moment. He was also asked if the traditional timelines around appointing a coach, of course New Zealand Rugby in the past waiting till the end of a World Cup to appoint a new coach, had changed, and he said yes, that they do see that, and what they're doing now and who they're talking to now recognises that those timelines around appointing a coach have changed. He said that he's confident in the conversations they're having and they're putting a lot of effort into it. Beyond that, not saying too much, but I think it does go to show, perhaps the strongest indication yet, that they are seriously looking into making a call on the next All Blacks coach, or the coach beyond the next year's World Cup anyway, before this World Cup comes around next year.
Yeah, so what do you think it all means for Scott Robertson then?
Well, he was asked, Mark Robinson, about Warren Gatland's comments, and he didn't really refer to Scott Robertson as such, but he did say that Warren Gatland was just one of 5 million people with an opinion on this particular topic. Maybe not 5 million, but obviously there's a lot of people that have an opinion on what happens here. He basically just reiterated what he had said before, that they were having a lot of good conversations around it with what people didn't exactly specify. But Scott Robertson last month, speaking to an overseas publication, said that that the All Blacks is his number one choice and he's in constant contact with New Zealand Rugby. Now, whether those New Zealand Rugby conversations that Mark Robinson refers to involve the constant contact that Scott Robertson's referring to, I'm not sure. You'd have to think so, that they're staying in some kind of communication, but that wasn't confirmed today. Mark Robinson also not wanting to reveal a timeline on when they might do this. All very general, but from what we picked up, a decision prior to the World Cup on post-World Cup coach wouldn't be a surprise based on what we learnt today.
Because timing is everything, isn't it? Because if you sort of appoint someone too soon, you take the limelight away from the person who's in the job at a critical time.
I think it's at this point it becomes sort of collateral damage in the landscape. If you want to get the person that you want to get the best person for the job in international rugby these days, you have to go early, and that's just part and parcel of it. So when it comes to Scott Robertson, we know he's been linked to a number of different international jobs around the world. So if New Zealand Rugby want him and want to get him, then a decision might have to come sooner rather than later.
Okay, we'll wait for you to dig around on that, Clay. Clay Wilson with sport there. All aboard, small pause on an Auckland bus near you. Auckland Transport is having a 6-week trial of small pets on all Auckland bus services from Boxing Day. The catch, they have to be in a carrier that sits on its owner's lap. AT's Group Manager of Metro Services, Derek Copper, joins us now. Hi, Derek. What counts as a small pet?
Kia ora, Lisa. Anything that can fit into a approved container, you can hold it on your lap or you can store it or keep it under the seat. It's what we consider a domestic small pet.
So domestic small pet. I can't bring a piglet or a chicken, even if it fits into a container?
If you keep it in the house and you keep it in a container and behaves on board, absolutely you can.
So why have you made this decision now?
Well, look, Lisa, we have been assessing this in 2019 when we were looking at introducing pets on buses across all of our modes. At the time, there were a number of concerns that we didn't have quite all the answers, and we have introduced pets on trains in 2020. We've monitored how it goes between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. and after 6:30 p.m. when peak travel is done, and all the weekends and public holidays. And we actually had a very good feedback and no issues arise about some of the concerns that we were made aware of. So now it's a good time to try it on buses. Rail will close on parts of the network from 26th of December, and we wanted to give those train customers who may be taking pets already on trains to have the same ability to do it on buses.
Do you know how many people do use the service on the trains to be able to take their pets?
No, I don't, and I don't believe this is widely used, but it is an option for people that have to take a pet to a vet, or they have to take it somewhere if they're going away and they don't have any other travel option. So it is something just to make option for those people that don't have any alternatives. I don't expect people to go to too many journeys to discover Auckland, but they can. They also can do that if they wish to.
Yeah, so I mean, how widely do you think it will actually be used? I mean, who does it open up to? Because the whole cage thing is a bit of an issue. If you're wanting to take your dog, for example, across town to go to the beach for a day and take a picnic, it will be prohibitive for some people to lump a cage around as well.
This is why we're testing with a small pet, so you can comfortably carry your pet in one container and your beach bag in the other arm or across the shoulders. And we know from my colleagues in Greater Wellington Regional Council, Metlink has been allowing pets on buses since 2019, and they haven't had much of an issue. And the use is sporadic. It's not something that causes concerns for anybody else who is relying on having plenty of space around themselves on buses.
So how have the bus drivers taken the news?
Look, we've consulted with them for a very long time. They have worked with us very constructively. We've got a good process in terms of what to do in situations where pets are misbehaving or what bus driver can or cannot do, and they're very comfortable. We have full support from them and their unions, and we will be learning over the next 6 weeks to see how it goes and whether we can extend it to bigger dogs with muzzles and other safety devices to make sure that everyone is happy and can travel safe.
Appreciate your time this evening. That's Derek Coper, who's from AT. He's the General Manager of Metro Services. Interested in your thoughts on that one. So small animals, domestic, he says, if they fit into a bag or a crate, a little crate, you can take them on the bus with you. Text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Wordle, Queen Elizabeth, how to do a rat test. Among the most popular topics we've turned to Google for this year. COVID-related searches feature highly in New Zealand's top 10 searches, as do major sporting events and the war in Ukraine. We sent reporter Tom Taylor out to get people's take on the most Googled items of the year.
Before revealing New Zealand's top 10 searches, I asked people on Auckland's Queen Street what they predicted their most searched items would be.
Bargains. I'm always looking for a bargain.
Shopping, food.
Weather. Weather and gas prices.
Probably something COVID related.
Travel will be number one, absolutely travel. Restaurants will be number two.
What kinds of stuff I can do here. Also, I'm looking for a car, so places where I can buy cars.
Probably R18 content.
Wouldn't have a clue, to be honest. I don't really look stuff up on Google. How to spell stuff mostly.
Good spelling comes in handy for the number one ranked item in New Zealanders' search history. That's Wordle, the word-guessing game that's taken the world by storm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Are you a daily wordler yourself?
I used to be a daily wordler, now more like a weekly now. But yeah, I did my fair share of it. What's Wordle? I don't even know what it is.
It's a word game. You have to guess the right word in 6 guesses.
Okay, interesting.
Other top 10 searches include locations of interest, the Australian Open, the All Blacks vs Ireland, and Ukraine.
Would any of these make your top 10, do you think?
No. Oh, Ukraine maybe, but the rest of it, no, not really.
Well, Australian Open probably. All Blacks vs Ireland, yes. And the World Cup, yes. I did check the World Cup to see the final 8. So there we are.
All Blacks versus Ireland, definitely. I think I googled that one. I would expect Queen Elizabeth to show up, fair enough.
When it comes to the Kiwis other Kiwis are searching, sports figures Ryan Fox, Zoe Sadowski-Synnott and Lydia Ko dominate the list, although broadcaster and fiancé of the Prime Minister Clark Gayford takes out the number one position, to the surprise of some.
Clark Gayford is number one.
Wayne Brown.
Yeah, I like Clark Gayford. I only know Lydia Ko.
In the how-to section, most people on the street claim they can do a number 4. That's tying a tie. Although the number one search, how to do a rat test, was a more divisive query.
Yeah, look, to be honest, I did check how to do a rat test.
How to do a rat test, are you for real? I mean, people know you put a thing up your nose, it's not that hard.
What about number 9?
How to be single. That's an interesting one.
Oh, yeah, that's sad.
Yeah. Haven't done that in a long time. We actually got married a few days ago, so...
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
The full breakdown of New Zealand searches is available at Google Trends.
And that was Tom Taylor reporting there. Let us know what you've been Googling most, 2101 on text. It is 28 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And of course, it's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nāianei ko Nona Peltier. She joins me in the studio. OK, Fonterra has upgraded its full year guidance. What's it got to say?
Well, it's got quite a lot to say, really. Their first quarter underlying profit up 84%. And that's partly because of the increase in dairy prices, which we've been talking about for some time. But, also that those prices are holding for the company because there's a big demand for the proteins they produce for nutritional values and so on. And so their ingredients business is doing really well. And they're expecting that to continue into the rest of the financial year, which ends for this company in July. They're saying that global supply is down still in Europe and Australia. It's a little bit down in New Zealand, but it's expected to pick up a bit and be about where it was last year. The United States is also showing a slight improvement. So overall, the Fonterra's outlook is very strong. And for their guidance for the full year is up at probably at least 55% over where it was previously. So they're looking at a full year guidance of between 50 to 70 cents, and that compares with a previous guidance of between 45 and 60 cents.
Okay, Air New Zealand, now this is interesting, has also offered an upgraded guidance, but not for the full year.
No.
What are the numbers and why? And is it taking into account the fuel situation?
Yeah, so it's talking about the fuel situation. It's saying that there has been a slight improvement in, I guess a reduction in the fuel prices. But they're seeing some very strong bookings. I was looking at some of their numbers there. If I can just find them handily. They're got to be here somewhere. 75% of pre-COVID levels across the entire network in December is what they're expecting. Domestic capacity running at just under 100%. So very strong. Short-haul international travel, about 85%. International at 70%. Their forward bookings are really good. They are not, though, giving us an actual number. They're saying that they're expecting their underlying profits for the first half to be in a range of 295 and 325 million. Now, that compares with, so 295 at the bottom end, that compares with a bottom end of 200 million previously. So that's almost like, that's an increase of almost 100 million. And then at the top end, they were expecting 275. Now they're looking at 325. But for the full year, they're saying there's still too much uncertainty. They're not sure at all how that's going to shape up. A lot depends on what else happens in the world. And there's that much volatility that almost no one can figure that out. And it really depends on demand continuing. And yet people are still cautious about international travel. And they're, basically cautious, and especially with inflation and the economic conditions, it may be that people don't have as much money to travel as they did in the past.
And tell us what you have from the markets, Nona.
Well, I just wanted to say that Fonterra's share price rose 2% on its good news, and Air New Zealand up also 2%. However, the market itself only rose 6 points to 11,617. And again, that's to do with those global worries that we're seeing. And the New Zealand dollar, though, it's holding on at 63.5 US cents. So that's going to be really good for, I guess, people traveling overseas anytime soon. And up slightly, rather at 94.5 Australian, which is still a pretty good number, and 52.1 British pounds.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. That's Nona Peltier with Business News. A Marakopa man, AWOL, with his 3 kids for almost a year, is being helped to stay off the grid by at least one person and may have found a structure of some sort to live in, according to the police. Tom Phillips, who previously prompted a full-scale search after taking his children bush, has been missing since last December. The children are aged between 6 and 9 years old, and Tom Phillips is a skilled bushman. Police have followed up several sightings of the family around the country, but with no joy, and are again appealing for information. They say Tom Phillips left the family farm with the children to avoid dynamics he perceives as not good for his children and is in breach of a parenting order. Otarahanga Mayor Max Baxter is urging Tom Phillips to come back with the children in time for Christmas.
It would almost be humorous if it wasn't so serious, to be honest. It's amazing how quickly time goes by for all of us, but I'm sure the time has gone incredibly slowly for the family.
Yeah, what effect do you think it is having on the community? Because obviously the police are seeking information. Someone must know something.
I have no doubt somebody knows something. So the effect on the family has to be immense. I mean, as mentioned, it was Maverick's birthday the other day. So that just doesn't happen without a lot of thought going into it. So For the family, absolutely devastating at this point. Someone know their whereabouts? I have no doubt somebody knows their whereabouts, because I just can't imagine for a moment that you could be missing for a year without some assistance from somewhere.
In fact, the police go a step further. They say they believe Tom is being supported by persons or people, and that is what is allowing him to continue to exist without any electronic trace. What would you say to the people who may be helping him?
At some time, you have to actually give consideration to the rest of the extended family, to the people of Marakopa, to the people of Otorohanga, and just be sensible about this. I mean, a year is a long time. It's a year is a long time in the development of the children. A year is a long time for the expectations of the family. So please give consideration to that and just say we've had enough now, and it's time to return the children back to where they should be.
The community is fundraising, right, for a reward. What can you tell us about that?
Look, I mean, we've seen that there's fundraising out there. Whether that has any impact on people knowing or disclosing their whereabouts, I'm unsure. Let's just hope it does make a difference and there's enough to actually inspire somebody to come forward.
Has this divided the community in any way, Max?
Without being directly involved with the community, I really probably couldn't comment on that, but I have no doubt it has an absolute effect on how the community feels, for sure.
Yeah. Obviously, Tom Phillips has some bush skills, significant, but the police are now suggesting he may have found somewhere, in essence, to set up camp, a structure, or somewhere else. What can you tell us about the area? Are there many houses that are empty? Are there many places where someone could set up camp long term?
Look, there's always going to be lodges or houses or sharing quarters. There'll be free from other habitation for long periods of time. But I'm also acutely aware we've had a very, very wet winter and spring, and unless you're under a solid roof, living in that environment would be incredibly challenging.
Yeah, and the kids, they're still pretty young, yep?
Yeah, very young. I mean, I was absolutely amazed the first time when Tom went missing with the children, that the children had the survival skills to get through that time out of civilization, and now we're talking another year has gone by. A huge expectation or ask on anybody, let alone children that haven't even reached the age of 10 years.
And it's almost Christmas, which, wow, it brings a whole new perspective to it, doesn't it, for family? Because that's the time when you usually like to be together.
Look, and I've been with people today and we've been talking about that, about, where we gather for Christmas time, what celebration is all about. And it is about family, it's about whānau, it's about getting together and celebrating life and telling the stories of the last year. So wouldn't that be great if the family is all together for Christmas? If
you could talk to Tom, what would you say?
Oh, exactly that, mate. Come out to your family. Let the children celebrate with the extended family. Let them celebrate with their friends. Let them just celebrate life as we know it.
And that's Max Baxter, Otorohanga Mayor there. It is 19 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. And Homai o Whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can text us 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The address is checkpoint@rnz, email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. We don't do snail mail. And Evie is standing by with the headlines. Ana Evie, mena pita pita kōrero.
A West Auckland youth worker is underwhelmed and unconvinced by the government's latest youth crime initiative. Police will now contact Oranga Tamariki within 24 hours of arresting a child under 14 if they've committed a serious offence, and within 48 hours a cross-agency plan will be put in place. A briefing to the Defence Minister shows a ship had to cut short a fisheries patrol operation in the Pacific due to staffing shortages. But Pene Henare is confident now that the borders are open, morale will lift and the workforce will stabilise. Ngai Tahu has welcomed the passing of the Three Waters Bill and says the changes give iwi a chance to address issues such as underinvestment in water infrastructure. The controversial bill passed its third reading in Parliament today, with Labour using its majority to get it over the line. The UN Biodiversity Chief says global talks getting underway in Canada are the world's last chance to reverse the destruction of the natural world. Nearly 200 countries are gathering in Montreal to try to reach an agreement on tackling nature's decline. And the European Commission has announced another round of sanctions against Russia in response to the invasion of Ukraine. Brussels says these new proposals will target a wide range of Russian entities and increase pressure on Moscow. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, in Auckland, a serious crash has closed State Highway 22 between Blackbridge Road and Great South Road south of Karaka. A breakdown in Auckland City southbound by Simon Street on-ramp has been pushed clear of lanes, and in Wellington at Ōtaki, queues southbound are easing and are now back to South Mamako Road on State Highway 1 there. I will have news and weather for you at 6 o'clock.
Kia ora rā, Eho. Serious concerns have been raised about anti-COVID vaccination lawyer Sue Gray and the spread of disinformation. So where is the line between personal beliefs and professional conduct or misconduct? Checkpoint is aware of several complaints to the Law Society about Sue Gray, raising concerns about potential breaches of standards and bringing the profession into disrepute. All relate to Ms Gray's comments or posts on her social media and a false claim regarding a COVID-related death. But more than a year on, some have still not been resolved. This week, Ms Gray represented parents who were refusing to let their 6-month-old son receive blood from COVID-19 vaccinated donors for life-saving surgery. Well, joining us now is University of Auckland law professor Mark Hennigan, who joins us now. Kia ora, Mark.
Kia ora, Lisa. Nice to hear your voice.
Tell me, where is this line between someone expressing their personal beliefs, which may indeed be disinformation, and professional misconduct in the area of law?
Well, misconduct is defined as follow, Lisa. It says it must be conduct that lawyers, reasonable lawyers would think is either disgraceful or dishonourable, or it's a willful and reckless contravention of the rules. And of course, in the rules, lawyers should always avoid anything that's inaccurate or wrong. But it has to be willful or reckless, and that requires some sort of state of mind that you're willfully knowing this is misinformation. And I think, to be fair to Sue Gray, and I think we've got to look at both sides of this issue, is that she, I think, probably strongly believes that the information she's providing and the things she's saying are right, and that we've all got it, a lot of other people have got it awfully wrong. So that's not so much willful or reckless. Some may say, well, it's reckless, but she may well argue that I've done my research and I've got some others who support my view. I mean, there was some evidence given in the court from a person from Canada who supported some of the views with regard to using vaccinated blood. So it's got to be quite serious before you say it's misconduct. It's got to be disgraceful, dishonourable, or a willful or reckless contribution of the rules. One of the things here that people may not understand is that once the complaint is made to the Law Society, there's no power, and this is one of the, some people say it should be changed, to suspend a lawyer or anything like that. They can still practice until the matter's getting really to the disciplinary tribunal, and it can take some time. In 2015, it took 143 days to complete the complaints process. Last count, 2021, the average is 259 days. So it does take time to work its way through the system. It has to go through a standing committee, and others look at it, then it has to go to the tribunal. And at that point, they can put an interim suspension on the person, but obviously it hasn't reached that point with regard to the Law Society complaints. Well, these complainants basically have little idea of where their complaints are in the system. But when you give us those average days, right, is that really ideal? No, I don't think it is. And there's a review being done with regard to Ron Patterson and others are running a review as to some of these rules that have to be looked at. And I'd be fairly confident they would look at this rule that if there's sufficient evidence, because to suspend someone's quite a serious matter, you'd have to have pretty good evidence to suspend them before there's a full hearing before the tribunal, because it's the old principle, you've got to be heard fully before you can suspend someone. So it would have to be a process whereby people can, if there's sufficient evidence, it would have to be set out what that would require, where someone can be suspended until the matter's fully heard, because it's a major thing. You're taking away people's livelihood and various things. But the process does take a long time, and that I can understand the frustration of people, but that's partly due to the fact that people are entitled to get full advice and people prepare their case and all the rest of it. But it does seem a long time when, obviously, if there's a matter where a lawyer is behaving in a way, and I'm not saying that they're doing that in any way, this is what people's perception of it is, that people feel frustrated that things aren't happening. Mark, tell me, are you ever off duty as an officer of the court? I mean, can you sort of say, I'm saying these things in my personal capacity? No. It's very clear in the rules. You're never off duty. You're never off duty. I mean, you must not mislead the court when you're in court. You must not mislead the public deliberately or recklessly when you're outside the court if you're a lawyer. It's very clear you're not off duty. That's very, very clear. You can't say, look, I'm perfect in court, but out of court I say whatever I think, and I'm very happy to mislead the public. No, it's not a double standard. You have to be consistent in all that you do. Now, there's a difference between misleading and misinformation. It's a matter of the state of mind, I suppose, of the person, because people, even then, the word reckless is an interesting one. It's not as bad as negligence. It's a higher standard of negligence. It requires people to kind of know the risk they're taking by giving us information that it may well be untrue. Now, that's not easy to prove sometimes if a person strongly believes it is true.
Really appreciate you joining us this evening. That's University of Auckland law professor Mark Henahan there. The opposition says a workforce crisis is beginning to emerge in the Defence Force as personnel leave for better salaries. A ship deployed on a fisheries patrol operation around Pacific nations had to cut its time short this year because of staffing shortages. National says it's an alarming situation, while the government maintains it's had no impact on the monitoring of illegal fishing. Our political reporter Annika Smith has more.
The gravity of staff attrition in the Defence Force, specifically the Navy, was laid out in an urgent briefing to the Defence Minister in August. The Chief of the Defence Force, Air Marshal Kevin Short, says it's getting worse and still affecting the Navy's ability to do its job. National's Defence spokesperson Jerry Brownlee says it's concerning.
It is quite alarming because we're also losing qualified soldiers who have various particular trades to the private sector because the salaries just aren't good enough.
In the August briefing was a request to pull one of two Navy vessels deployed on a fisheries patrol operation in Fiji, Niue, Samoa, Tonga, Tuvalu and Vanuatu a month earlier than planned. The ship, HMNZS Wellington, is now sitting idle in port to free up engineering personnel for other operations. Air Marshal Short is clear remuneration is a key factor for people leaving the force. Jerry Brownlee believes there's also low morale after many troops were deployed to MIQ.
We have a small military, a very capable military, but that capability can easily be compromised by the rapid loss of personnel.
Monitoring of illegal fishing is an important part of New Zealand's relationship with its Pacific neighbours. But Foreign Affairs Minister Nanaia Mahuta says it's work done with partners.
We work with Australia in the way that we support the monitoring and regulation of fisheries activities.
Fisheries Minister David Parker says any interference with fisheries patrols is serious, but this doesn't appear to be the case.
I'm advised that there's no effect on the fisheries patrols.
Jerry Brownlee says it's more than fisheries patrols. It's about a presence in a region highly contested by the likes of China and the US.
Well, it's very clear that the attrition rates inside the Navy, particularly at the moment, are compromising our ability to be in the Pacific doing the sort of work that we have been doing over a number of years.
The government ring-fenced $90 million out of this year's budget to improve the salaries of lower-paid Defence Force staff. In a statement, the Defence Minister, Penny Henare, said the challenges of staff attrition are not unique to the Defence Force. He's confident now that the borders are open, morale will lift and the workforce will stabilise.
Political reporter Annika Smith there. It is 9 minutes to 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's borne witness to some of this country's most significant historical moments. The whare tupuna at Te Koete Pā, built by Te Kuti, turned 150 this week, and now its trustees are looking to the next 150 years. Our reporter Jamie Tahana and camera operator Marika Habazi paid a visit.
Te Tokanga Nui a Noho stands as an impressive sight, looking down on the heart of Te Kuiti. Ornately carved, uniquely orange, and this week it's turned 150. Ngāti Maniapoto kaumātua and historian Tom Roa says it was built as a gift.
Te Tokanga Nui a Noho, a gift from Te Koti, Te Ngāti Maniapoto, in recognition perhaps, but also of the partnership between Ngāti Maniapoto and the Ringatu faith.
The Māori leader who was exiled to the Chatham Islands without trial, but managed to escape with his followers. The Crown pursued him across the North Island until King Tawhiao granted him sanctuary in the then self-governing King Country. Lisa Murray is the co-chair of Te Kuiti Pā.
Through that time of Te Kooti taking refuge here, it was a thank you to Ngāti Maniapoto for looking after him during that time. It's really important to note that the whare was given to Ngāti Maniapoto me ona hapu maha, but Ngāti Rora are merely the kaitiaki.
The wide-gazing eyes of Te Tokanga Nui a Noho's Tiko Tiko have borne witness to much history. It's been a sanctuary as refugees from Waikato sought shelter within it after fleeing south of the Puniu. It's been the scene of debate and determination as Maniapoto sought to protect its land and sovereignty, while the rolling hills of Maniapoto were taken away. It's been converted into a hospital as disease and the influenza pandemic devastated Te Rohe Pōtai. The whare tūpuna's even been moved as the main trunk railway pushed its way across the front.
If you think of 150 years for Te Tokanga Nui a Noho, that's 2 world wars, 2 pandemics, the loss of our language and our land, and the everlasting effects of colonisation. So for us, it's quite a big kaupapa.
Te Tokanga Nui a Noho has also been a source of strength. In the 20th century, as Māori fought to survive, stories and reo were taken to the quiet of the marae, where memories and histories were clung to, where Maniapoto held faith in their past, determined there would be a future. And this weekend, it was where the Prime Minister apologised to Ngāti Maniapoto for nearly 2 centuries of treaty breaches, and the signing of a $165 million settlement. Tom Roa says it's no accident the apology was on the same weekend as the Tupuna Whare's celebration.
Te Kuiti is the narrowing into the valley of the hills. It's also a narrowing and a focusing of the people of Ngāti Maniapoto in this space. And this whare is the very heart of that narrowing, of that focusing of the people.
Over the past week, thousands have come to Te Kuiti, many of them Maniapoto returning home, to celebrate Te Tokanga Nui a Noho. A new waharoa was unveiled for future manuhiri to pass beneath. Lisa Murray says there were days of celebrations, and the pā is looking to build its own archive. With the settlement signed, Maniapoto are looking to the next 150 years, and what kind of future the Tiko Tiko will witness for its people.
Our whare is a focal point for Maniapoto. It is a sign of unity and collectivism and strength, and also resilience, because our people went through so much to be able to maintain it.
Tom Roa says he's sure the people of Maniapoto had the strength to ensure that future will be great.
And if you'd like to look at the video version of that story, it'll be on our webpage. The first 3 episodes of a new Netflix documentary about Harry and Meghan are being released tonight at 9 o'clock in New Zealand. The couple says it'll give them a chance to tell their story. In the trailer, they've already raised allegations about the leaking of stories to the press. The BBC's Sarah Campbell has the story.
Arriving at this glitzy awards ceremony in New York.
Harry, do you have a message for your family?
Do you have a message for your family, Harry was asked. Not last night. On stage, the chat was light-hearted.
I actually thought we were just going on date night, so I found it quite weird that we're sharing the room with 1,500 people. But I mean, we don't get out much because our kids are so small and young.
With them, Kerry Kennedy, who presented them with a Human Rights Award named after her father, Robert F. Kennedy.
You know, we're so proud of their work on racial justice and on mental health parity and awareness and the multitude of things that they've done.
What they've done since meeting 6 years ago is now the subject of a Netflix series.
I realized they're never going to protect you.
It is hotly anticipated, and most people will have an opinion.
I didn't want history to repeat itself.
The series will be pored over, dissected and commented on, just as these trailers have been, with the context in which some of these images have been used open to question. From a PR perspective, there are risks.
As much as someone might want to go and tell their story and their truth, someone else might have a different recollection and their different perspective on what happened. And people will then start questioning your truth, picking holes in it, and if there's evidence to the contrary, suddenly the narrative can switch.
There's a hierarchy of the family.
This producer likens the series to the reality TV she's won numerous awards for.
A bit like Big Brother, it's sort of who wins, you decide. You'll watch that series and think, the royal family need looking after, they've come out of it better. Or you'll be on the side of Harry and Meghan and think, wow, they had to put up with the loss and I'm on their side.
But this isn't reality TV, it's real life. Today, the King celebrated best business practice in Westminster. Tomorrow, he knows his family may well be a global story once again. At what point, if at all, do they decide to answer back?
Tell the truth. Are you going to watch it? Text us on 2101, email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. I can feel the fumes coming off Evie. Are you going to watch it?
Not fumes, just no. No, I won't be watching it.
Oh, I will. Get a thing of popcorn, pull up. It's, you got to know what's going on.
It's not entertainment.
I know, but you need to keep across these things. Okay, on the subject of pets and being allowed on the bus in Auckland, this person says pets on public transport, great news. Paul reckons that Auckland bus seats are no way wide enough for pet carriers. I think you can only take little tiny petite bijou, put them in your handbag, backpack kind of dogs or cats. Bloody ridiculous allowing pets on public transport other than guide dogs, this person says, when there are so many people who could have an allergic reaction on the buses. That's from Kate. Another person, Leslie, who says that they are a pooch lover. She says, what if they poo with nerves? The stench is absolutely gag-making. Mine pooed in its cage in my car once. I retched. Great visual on that one. Someone else says you can buy a pet carrying backpacks. That is what most Wellington people use. From Terry. Thanks, Terry.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te pō. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. A woman who laid a complaint with the Law Society 18 months ago about lawyer Sue Gray says she's concerned Ms Gray is exploiting her platform to spread misinformation. Ms Gray was in court representing parents who were refusing to let their baby son have the blood of people vaccinated against COVID-19. Jacinta told Checkpoint it's irresponsible of Ms Gray to promote her controversial views while acting as a lawyer.
I care about some vulnerable people, and I felt that the misinformation was putting them at risk by encouraging people not to consider masking, not to consider social distancing, not to consider vaccinations.
Jacinta says Sue Gray takes every opportunity to push conspiracy theories in her capacity as a lawyer. The High Court yesterday took guardianship of the baby to allow him to have life-saving heart surgery. The Prime Minister says Labour will spend the summer running a ruler over the government's books to find ways to curb spending. Spending relative to GDP has come down to 31% from 34%, and the government has been moving away from direct COVID support with a plan to return to pre-pandemic spending levels. In her end-of-year interview with RNZ, Jacinda Ardern says that will mean finding ways to prioritise focus and prioritise spending.
It's one part alongside actually just being mindful that there is only so much that you're able to prioritise. And in 2023, we know that we need to make sure that we keep that ongoing focus on the constant balance we'll have to strike between supporting New Zealanders through 2023 whilst making sure that we're seeing the growth that we need.
The Prime Minister wouldn't specify which projects could be on the chopping block. A long-serving volunteer firefighter says many of those who complained about bullying or harassment have been re-traumatised by their colleagues closing ranks. The Public Service Commission review has found the organisation hasn't worked fast enough since a 2019 review found a culture of harassment and bullying. Tony Sutorius, who runs VolleyNet, an online support group for volunteer firefighters, says culture change hasn't filtered through to some local brigades.
It's been common, in fact I'd probably say it's been normal, that people who have made these complaints have ended up basically run out of the brigades. And in many cases, or at least a few cases that I've personally had contact with, people have actually been effectively forced out of their community as a whole.
Tony Sutorius hopes the review will result in real change at Fire and Emergency with the establishment of an independent complaints authority. A West Auckland youth worker is underwhelmed and unconvinced by the government's latest youth crime initiative. Under a new approach, the police will contact oranga tamariki within 24 hours of arresting a child under 14 if they've committed a serious offence. Within 48 hours, a cross-agency plan will be put in place. The announcement also includes another $2 million for wraparound support in Auckland, Waikato, Northland and Bay of Plenty. Hadley Powesi from the youth organisation Zeal says that's nothing.
It's another headline. It's not going to do much at all. $2 million is a drop in the ocean of what's needed.
Hadley Powesi says community organisations need more funding to do work on the ground. Ngāi Tahu has welcomed the passing of the Three Waters Bill, saying it will bring safe drinking and protect the environment. The controversial bill passed its third reading in Parliament today, with Labour using its majority to get it over the line. 4 regional entities will now manage water services and infrastructure with mana whenua representation. Te runanga o Ngāi Tahu Kaiwhakahaere, Lisa Tumahai, says the changes give iwi a chance to address issues such as underinvestment in water infrastructure. She says Ngāi Tahu will also share extensive governance and scientific expertise. And one person has died and another has been injured in a 2-vehicle crash south of Auckland City this afternoon. State Highway 22 has been closed between Blackbridge and Great South Roads at Karaka while the serious crash unit investigates. That's the news.
This Saturday morning, if you told someone 150 years ago how well off the world was now, they would think it was paradise. So why does everything feel so broken? Economist Brad DeLong on his big new book, Slouching Towards Utopia. Plus, Stonehenge keeps on giving, and Hugh Rennie on 150 years of misrule in the Chathams. Call Kim Hillerhoff. Join me Saturday morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're back with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, cloudy periods today with rain or showers in eastern areas and strong easterly winds. Showers everywhere tomorrow, easing in the evening. For Bay of Plenty, patchy rain, mainly about the eastern ranges, becoming heavier and widespread tomorrow, easing tomorrow evening. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers today, rain tomorrow, heavy in northern Gisborne, clearing in the afternoon or evening. From Waikato to Wellington, including Wairarapa and the Central High Country, also for Nelson, Marlborough and Buller, mainly fine today, but patchy rain tonight in Waikato. Occasional rain tomorrow, sometimes heavy with possible thunderstorms from Waikato to Manawatu, easing in the evening. For Canterbury, fine spells, brief rain around midday tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain, sometimes heavy with possible thunderstorms tomorrow evening. Otago and Southland, cloudy periods and scattered showers. And for Te Kohu, Chatham Islands, fine breaks. The time is 6 minutes past 6. Our next news headlines are at 6:30.
Ngā mihi Evie, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A newly prioritised spending plan and fresh ministerial line-up are part of Labour's plan to reset the political landscape for the start of next year. Election year. The government's been under pressure on spending on projects like the health reforms, the proposed RNZ TV-NZ merger, and most controversially, Three Waters. Senior leaders will be looking at the best way to clear the decks to give the governing party its best shot at securing a third term. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern told our political editor, Jane Patterson, spending priorities will be re-examined over the summer break.
There's a delicate balance to be struck next year, and I think every economy is going to face this. Firstly, around the world we're seeing those high levels of inflation. So firstly, we need to support New Zealanders through that. You've already seen some of the initiatives that we've undertaken to help ease the cost of living. In the new year, we'll continue to assess what other things can we do to support New Zealanders. But we need to do that in a way that doesn't make inflation worse, and that will be top of our mind. The second thing we need to do is make sure that we are really prioritising our focus and our spending. We've already been looking at areas to trim back, and our spending relative to GDP has come from 34% down to 31%. And the third thing we'll be doing in the new year, as we have done this year, is look at how we can support our sectors that will be the growth engine.
Talking about your second point, prioritising spending, can you give some examples of things that may be having the ruler run over them in terms of whether they are still feasible within your manifesto or within the economic environment?
One of the things I'd say is we've been doing that all the way through. It's why, for instance, we already have that decrease in spending, which has been a focus for us even over the last year. We said once we came off the period of where we needed to put in those extra supports for COVID, we would be in the position to ease those and phase those down. And now where Crown spending is much more alongside where you've seen Crown spending be relative to GDP as a general rule of thumb for government.
You've come under a lot of political pressure. There have been direct things targeted. Obviously the RNZ TVNZ merger, the health reforms, 3 waters, and on the 2 of them at least there's money still to be spent. So is there any more urgency or priority being looking at taking some of those projects off the board or delaying them?
Here I would say it's not just spending is one part of the ruler that we will be running over some of our agenda for the new year, but it's one part alongside actually just being mindful that there is only so much that you're able to prioritise. And in 2023, we know that we need to make sure that we keep that ongoing focus on the constant balance we'll have to strike between supporting New Zealanders through 2023 whilst making sure that we're seeing the growth that we need as a way to buffet some of the experience. So it'll be
Can voters expect you to be coming forward, for example, at the start of 2023 and saying, actually, here are some projects that we're not going ahead with, as opposed to a levelling down of general spending?
So as I say, it does need to be about both, casting the ruler over to ensure that where we are spending, it's to the benefit of New Zealanders, addressing long-term challenges they expect us to, but likewise that has to be the ruler for our focus, our projects and our priorities as well. So we will be spending some time over summer casting our eye over the agenda to make sure that where we are investing our energy and resources, they are on those areas that New Zealanders would expect us to be.
Are there any specific projects under review?
Look, here I do want to just give a bit of time for us to go back and to go through that exercise, but the other area of focus for me will be on the team that we take through in 2023. I've always signalled that we'd be going through a reshuffle at the beginning of the year. Part of that is also acknowledging there'll be people who will be signalling retirement. That's part of the political process and cycle as well. We'll be announcing what I describe as a handful of retirements next week. Those are not unanticipated for those individuals and for our team, but that really I think will demonstrate some of the thinking we're doing to make sure we're making the most of our experience in our team, but also some of the excellent talent we have in our caucus.
And that was Te Piramia Jacinda Ardern speaking to our political editor Jane Patterson. And you can hear the full interview on Focus on Politics after Checkpoint tomorrow night and following the 5 o'clock news on Saturday. Dame Patsy Reddy has been a lifelong rugby fan and now she'll have more power than any woman has ever had at New Zealand Rugby. The former Governor-General will become the first woman to be chair of the board when she takes on the role early next year. Dame Patsy spoke to our sports reporter Felicity Reid and joked that she doesn't expect to be involved with selecting the All Blacks anytime soon.
We've all got views about who should be in the teams in black, haven't we? Let's face it. But, I still remember as a teenager being absolutely in awe of B.G. Williams. He was my absolute hero in the day, back in the day, and I grew up in Hamilton, which is a pretty proud rugby city. We've all got our views on rugby, but I think I've got a reasonable degree of governance experience, and I really like working with a team. And I always work with teams that I respect and work well with, and I'm pretty sure we'll have that with New Zealand Rugby, both at the board and executive level.
And coming in at this time where women's rugby really is on the rise in New Zealand, is that pretty important to you as well? You've spoken about wanting to take it forward and capitalising.
We've got such a great opportunity, haven't we? I think that New Zealand Rugby was really brave in stepping forward and bidding for the Rugby World Cup. That was a step into the unknown, and I look back at when, then COVID hit and it was quite traumatic, brave of them to continue, brave of them to put a big investment in it, and it's paid off in spades, hasn't it? It's been magical, but we don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose that magic, we don't want to lose that crowd experience, all those people that have never watched rugby before but now find it something they want to follow. We've got people like Portia Woodman and Ruby Tui who are, fan favourites, Rua Heidemont, they're just, and Sarah Hirini, of course, who's one of my absolute favourites too. I can't have favourites, I know, though I have to acknowledge, because I've said it before publicly, I do have a dog named after Portia.
Also, player welfare is obviously quite important to you in your role with the Centre for Brain Research. Is there anything that you'll be able to bring from those dual roles?
I can bring the connections of the experts, and I know they're already working together. I'm really impressed. The Rugby Foundation and also New Zealand Rugby are actively involved in doing whatever they can to help at the forefront of the research and development and looking after players. And we've brought in some changes to the rules at the community level. All of these are designed to try and make the game a safer place. Everything's, driving a car, is risky, and so there are risks. It is a contact sport. We need to set up our players to be safer, and that transitioning women and girls, but also boys, into a tackle sport is something that I see as really important. There's the right way and the wrong way to do these things, and that makes a big difference.
It is 14 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's been a dramatic day in Peruvian politics, with the country's leader being ousted and arrested. President Pedro Castillo is no longer in charge after declaring a state of emergency. He tried to dissolve parliament before being impeached by his colleagues. The Vice President, Dina Boluarte, has been sworn in as interim leader. Mr Castillo had only been president for 18 months. Now he's under arrest. Here's the BBC South America correspondent Katie Watson.
Peru is used to political turbulence, but this is definitely turbocharged. It started with Pedro Castillo coming out saying there'd be a temporary dissolution of Congress, an exceptional emergency government, and elections will be called as soon as possible for a new Congress to draw up a new constitution. He made this announcement shortly before Congress was due to debate its third impeachment motion against him since he came to power last year. So whether it was a preemptive strike to avoid impeachment, or as his critics have called it, a coup, it's certainly a coup that has ultimately backfired, because the Congress voted to get rid of him, and now he is being referred to as the former president, and a new president has been sworn in. According to the local media, he actually walked in to speak with authorities, and it looks like he's in custody, but there's very little detail on exactly what will happen now. Dina Boluarte, who is the vice president, has been sworn in until 2026. She's the first woman to take the top job. Peru in 2020, there were something like 3 presidents in 5 days. It's a country that has been beset by political unrest. It was hit hard during COVID. There have been mass protests over increasing living costs. It might be the end of the chapter for Pedro Castillo, but I think this is just going to start a new political chapter, and that probably won't be any more stable.
To the US now, the Republican finger-pointing has started after their party failed to take a crucial Senate seat in Georgia. Democrat Raphael Warnock narrowly defeated Herschel Walker in a runoff race. The unsuccessful Republican candidate had the backing of former President Donald Trump. Utah Senator Mitt Romney says an endorsement by Mr Trump is the kiss of death. CNN's Manu Raju reports.
Hello there. Senate Republicans are reeling after a disappointing election cycle, leaving them deeper in the minority, and now trying to figure out what went wrong.
It was frustrating. I was optimistic that we would get a majority.
Herschel Walker's lost to Democrat Raphael Warnock in Tuesday's Georgia runoff, giving Democrats an additional seat and a slim 51-49 majority in the chamber. It comes after Republicans also fell short in Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Arizona, and Nevada, all states they had hoped to win. At the heart of the GOP criticism, the role of Donald Trump, who handpicked Walker and several other candidates who faltered in the general election. stumping late on the campaign trail for Republicans who ultimately lost.
Was Donald Trump a problem this year?
Democrats in many cases were able to kind of turn it into a choice election because of Trump's presence out there, because a lot of the candidates that had problems in these elections were running on the 2020 election being stolen. And I don't think independent voters were having it.
Utah GOP Senator Mitt Romney calling Trump's endorsement the kiss of death, and retiring Pennsylvania Republican Pat Toomey saying Walker's loss is another example that, quote, the Trump obsession is very bad for Republicans. Trump defenders pushing back.
No, I think we're losing close elections. Not because of Donald Trump. So if the answer to everything in town is Trump's problem, then you're missing the boat.
Some directing their anger at Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell for refusing to embrace an election year agenda.
No agenda. No agenda.
I believe we ought to have a Republican agenda and give people a real purpose for how to vote, why to vote for us.
Yet many blame Rick Scott's Senate campaign arm for staying out of GOP primaries in 2022, with GOP leaders calling on the party to intervene in primaries in the 2024 cycle, when Democrats are defending 23 seats and Republicans just 11.
Should you have taken a more active role and try to prop up the candidates who would have been more electable?
Well, I think you've got to rely on the voters of the states. It's their states.
There's talk of...
I trust the voters.
The additional seat now gives Senate Democrats more power to issue subpoenas and breathing room to confirm President Biden's nominations.
An aristocrat, an ex-army officer and a former politician are among 25 people who've been arrested in Germany on suspicion of plotting to overthrow the government. Police say the group was preparing an armed attack on the Reichstag building. The BBC's Jenny Hill reports from Berlin.
Before first light, a plot uncovered. Officers interrupting what investigators believe was a terror cell, preparing to overthrow the German government. Its members, they say, were prepared to kill to achieve their aim.
According to our findings, the association has set itself the goal of eliminating the existing state order in Germany, the free democratic basic order, using force and military means.
This German aristocrat is believed to be one of the ringleaders. It's thought Heinrich VIII, Prince Royce, planned to install himself as head of a new German government and had even chosen a cabinet of ministers. The plot was reportedly hatched here at his hunting lodge. It sounds extraordinary, fantastical, but prosecutors say the group were serious and extremely dangerous. They'd set up a military arm, attempting to recruit from the German police force and army. Most of those arrested today are believed to be part of the so-called Reichsbürger movement. The Citizens of the Reich is a loose grouping of conspiracy theorists who refuse to recognise the modern German state and reject the authority of its government. It's believed there are 21,000 of them scattered across the country and estimate that 10% are potentially violent. The Reichsbürger have protested alongside COVID deniers, anti-vaxxers and followers of QAnon. They were there 2 years ago when a mob tried to storm the German parliament. Politicians here were already worried. Conspiracy theories, including those espoused by the Reichsbürger, have proliferated here in recent years, particularly during the pandemic. That's already led to violence today, driving home once again just how potentially dangerous such disinformation can be. People here used to dismiss, deride the Reichsbürger. Germany's learning they're far from harmless.
China's announced sweeping changes to its national pandemic response, unveiling 10 new guidelines that loosen some of the world's tightest restrictions. Isolating at home is now allowed, and mandatory QR code scanning has been largely scrapped. As the government starts to move away from its zero COVID policy, there are concerns for its elderly population. CNN's Ivan Watson reports.
China is the last country in the world still trying to completely eradicate COVID. But after months of harsh restrictions, some of the COVID lockdown barriers in China are starting to come down. This move by authorities comes just days after protests erupted across the country against Beijing's zero COVID policy. This breath of fresh air for some exhausted citizens carries a harsh reality. Experts predict a tough COVID winter is likely coming.
The winter is the worst time to have a large epidemic because hospitals may already be under pressure for other reasons during the winter.
The highly contagious Omicron variant is already spreading through the Chinese population.
Unlike the rest of the world, very, very few people in China proportionally have had COVID. And that's because of the strict lockdowns that the Chinese government has implemented. And so there's a very low baseline immunity. The other issue is that China has been using its domestically produced vaccines, which are less effective than the mRNA vaccines.
China has one of the world's highest COVID vaccination rates. But vaccination for the elderly in China lags far behind. 23% of Chinese citizens over 80 are completely unvaccinated. That leaves roughly 8.4 million very vulnerable, unvaccinated people.
So if COVID was to spread through China now, I think we'd see a lot of severe cases in that group of people with either no vaccination or no recent vaccination.
Epidemiologists say Hong Kong may offer a roadmap for what could happen in mainland China. After Hong Kong successfully maintained a zero-COVID bubble for nearly 2 years, Omicron spread out of control here last winter. At the peak of the outbreak, Hong Kong suffered more than 7,000 deaths in 6 weeks, most of them elderly. At the time, it was the highest COVID mortality rate in the world, driven largely, experts say, by very low vaccination rates among people over 60.
Galloping energy prices in Australia are driving a boom in domestic solar installations. It's predicted that 2023 will be a record year for self-generated electricity. But bad news for those who haven't got their solar panels yet. The wait times are blowing out. The ABC's John Daly reports.
3.4 million rooftop solar systems across Australia and counting. Solar power is popular and more households are turning to it to try to counter soaring energy costs. Tim Dixon, owner of Solar Australia, a retailer which sells solar systems across the country, has seen a sharp increase in sales since mid-year.
We've had a threefold increase. But the other component to that is we're now actually doing solar with battery and backup circuits for blackout protection. Basically, it didn't exist, much 2-3 years ago. Now it's probably hitting around 35 to 40% of our total sales.
The federal budget forecast a 56% increase in retail electricity prices over 2 years, and the Albanese government's now trying to figure out what market intervention and other mechanisms it could use to drive costs down. Finn Peacock is the founder of Solar Quotes, a digital platform that connects consumers with installers. He says traffic to the site has been off the charts since the upheaval in the East Coast energy grid began earlier this year.
There's a very direct relationship between how much the politicians and the media talk about rising energy prices and traffic to our website and inquiries. The traffic has been off the charts. It started about 6 months ago, towards the end of June, when the media and the politicians started talking about, quote, energy crisis.
The Clean Energy Regulator recently upgraded its forecast for newly installed rooftop solar this year from 300,000 units to 320,000. The Executive General Manager, Mark Williamson, says rising energy costs are contributing to the surge.
Yes, it's changed dramatically. So we've now revised this year's numbers up from 2.3 gigawatts of total capacity added to around about 2.7 to 2.8 gigawatts total added this year. So it's been quite a big uptick.
Next year's forecast is higher. The regulator expects there'll be another 350,000 rooftop solar units installed, adding 3 gigawatts of capacity, equivalent to the capacity generated by one coal-fired power unit.
'Tis the season for giving, but most drivers would rather not be given a speeding ticket. However, in the US, some motorists have received an unexpected holiday surprise when police have pulled them over. Kristen Ray has the story.
Sergeant Strack with the Lake Placid Police Department spends his Monday on the job patrolling traffic and sometimes issuing tickets.
Are you surprised?
Yeah, absolutely.
And while some of the drivers who he pulls over are guilty of common traffic violations,
I was expecting a ticket.
instead of handing them a ticket,
I'm not going to give you a ticket, okay? I'm going to give you something else.
he's giving out second chances instead, paired with $100 cash.
So you get what's coming to you, and this is definitely not what I thought was coming to me.
An anonymous Secret Santa dropped $2,500 off at the Lake Placid Police Department, and with the help from some elves is giving back to the community during the holiday season.
If someone gets pulled over by the police, they're expecting what could be a negative interaction because they might drive away with a ticket. This gives us the opportunity at the officer's discretion to brighten someone's day instead.
This generosity started a few years ago and has become an annual tradition, with surprises spilling over into Saranac Lake too.
It's nice to just be able to go out and, as opposed to giving someone a ticket, be able to say, hey, you know what, here, have a better day, here's $100.
And as these officers give back, the people ticketed say they're planning to return the favor this holiday season.
Get some Christmas gifts for a family member or something like that, pay it forward. Somebody that doesn't have a lot going on right now.
I'm going to give it to my guys so they can spend it on their families for Christmas, since I'm the one in charge and they're working. So.
A suspect on the run in Devon, England, has been foiled by a herd of cows. As he was being tracked in cars, on foot and in the air by helicopter, the man found himself in a field, surrounded by the long horns of the law, who made a daring arrest. The BBC's Dan Johnson reports, and a warning: listeners may find the further use of puns disturbing.
4-4, we've got this mail unless the other job's urgent.
This is the moment officers called in the National Police Air Service helicopter to help them find a suspect trying to hoof it across fields in North Devon.
Yeah, go ahead, M44. So he's in a field on the far side of the road to where the unit was.
Attempting to hide was utterly useless. Before officers could pin him down, he was surrounded by a group of 10 or 12 cows.
He's 2 fields across from the lane, if that makes sense to them.
The long faces of the law then began herding the fugitive towards the edge of the field.
He's actually being chased by some cows at the moment. In fact, unit on the track waving at me. Yeah, if you walk up that track, I'll tell you when you're near him.
Having been moved closer to the road, the suspect was easily arrested.
40, thank you, 37.
As for his crime, so far we don't have a clue.
Thank you,
but the stakes were clearly high.
Thank the cows.
And the bovine vigilantes have been warned not to take the law into their own hooves. Now, that is about all we have time for this evening. The late news team's going to keep you updated. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō. And tomorrow from 5 a.m, First Up is joined by a royal expert after Harry and Meghan released their new Netflix documentary overnight. It's thought that the royal family are bracing themselves for bombshells. 3 episodes drop tonight at about 9 o'clock. What will I be doing? Kaua e wariwari te atatero i a mātou kōrero. Check out our stories online.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. The Prime Minister says Labour will spend the summer finding ways to prioritise focus and prioritise spending. A woman who laid a complaint with the Law Society 18 months ago about lawyer Sue Gray says she's concerned Ms Gray is exploiting her platform to spread misinformation. And a long-serving volunteer firefighter says many of those who complained about bullying or harassment have been re-traumatised by their colleagues closing ranks. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7 o'clock.
Storage tanks for aviation fuel up for debate.
If we were to build a tank that would cover us, say, for the incident that's happened, that would possibly cost something between $50 to $60 million.
State Highway 6 is close to completion.
There will be a huge sigh of relief with the highway reopened.
And speed cameras are getting a revamp.
Waka Kotahi expects a tripling in the number of fines going out to New Zealanders from the speed cameras by 2030.
Keeping the wheels turning. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Kia ora anō, and you're with Trending Now and still with Evie Ashton. Now it's time for the detail. Here's Emile Donovan.
Kia ora, I'm Emile Donovan, and today on the detail, a potential sea change in the very fabric of publicly funded sport in Aotearoa.
A newly formed athletes' union could shake up how sports people are employed. The Athletes Cooperative, which has been spearheaded by decorated Olympic rower Mahi Drysdale, wants athletes treated as employees rather than contractors.
Some sports have big audiences, big sponsors and lots of money. Think rugby and cricket and football and so on. On the other hand, you have athletes who play less popular spectator sports. Cyclists, for example, and sprinters and pole vaulters, rowers. And these sports tend to be focused on the individual, and the athletes tend to be funded through taxes, grants from High Performance Sport NZ, which gives out millions of dollars to hundreds of athletes every year. The thing is, they don't get that much money. The base training grant is just $25,000 a year, and these are, remember, the people who hope to one day win us medals at the Olympics. So today on the podcast, Stuff's national correspondent Dana Johansson sits down with me to discuss a landmark case being taken to the Employment Relations Authority, which could fundamentally change the nature of high-performance sport